Okay, so layer 4 again, it's transport layer. I talked to you earlier about what ports. This manages ports. Okay, so if I create a website that uses an alternative port, then I'm using a port other than the default for web traffic or HTTP traffic, which is what? What port is the default for HTTP traffic? Michael. We just covered this 3 times. Michael Ebert. HTTP, what port? Frank, HTTP, what port? Oh, for Pete's sakes. HTTP, what port? Port 80. Guys, you have to memorize this. You have to write it down. It'll be on your test. Okay, those are just 2 examples. HTTP, SMTP uses what port?
2155.
You gotta be quiet. What port? Aaron, did you just do this?
No.
Port 25, okay? Uses certain ports. There are default ports used by certain applications or certain transport, or I'm sorry, certain types of communication. And this is how they're organized. This is a chart that's in your book. You need to copy it or type it or do it or know it because you're going to see it on the test. You're going to have to know this. Ports 0 through 1023, those are the ones that are used everywhere. An example is the port 80 for HTTP, port 25 for SMTP, ports 21 and 22 for FTP. Okay? Those are well known. There are certain ones that you're going to have to memorize, like FTP, SMTP, HTTP, HTTPS. You'll have to know that one. Then beyond the range of 1023, 1024 through 1049, and then 1051. Actually, 3389 actually should be in that first range, but it's well known. These are used for specific applications that vendors use. Not generic FTP or generic HTTP, but specific ones. For example, they give the example of remote desktop protocol, which is a Microsoft-specific thing. Remote desktop protocol uses port 3389 by default. And then beyond 49,151, 1024 to 49,151, beyond 49,151, then these are ones that are used by the operating system to temporarily open and close based upon going to someplace. These, even though we use port 80 when we get to a website, these ports are open to kind of fool, like they're used on the internet, to dynamically open for a particular workstation to fool others from knowing what port is actually open. Okay? These are used dynamically. Or you could actually create these like I did for the websites. Instead of 8081, I could use something beyond 49,152 to use also. Okay? Memorize these 3 ranges and in general what they're used for. 0 through 1023 are ones that are, you don't play with. Okay, well-known ports. 1024 through 49,151, those are ones that are used by specific applications, although you sometimes can get away with using them. The ones beyond 49,151 can be used either by your operating system automatically, or you can assign them if necessary. Okay? Dynamic and private ports. Memorize that, and you're good to go along with the protocols I'm going to give you here. What?
I can get it all. Yeah, I can.
It's in your book. Okay? Inbound and outbound ports. Okay? Inbound and outbound ports. Give me an example of an inbound port. Or I'm sorry, an outbound port. What are we talking about when we talk about outbound ports? Anyone know? Come on, guys. Start thinking. Take a guess. Who has a guess? Outbound port. What are we talking about? Zach,
Wants to go out.
describe it to me. Yes.
Computer sending something to something.
Okay, your computer is accessing something. Okay, your computer is accessing another computer. The outbound port, there are multiple outbound ports. One is used to establish the connection, and the inbound port is what that computer is listening on. So when your computer, your desktop computer, your laptop computer, goes out and communicates with something else, it opens up a dynamic port, okay, that is specific to that transmission. And so if Zach's computer is communicating with Miguel's computer, the outbound port is influenced by the type of communication. In other words, is it a website, is it FTP, is it email, and also by the communication between Zach and Miguel. That is unique. If he opens up the exact same type of website on Austin's computer, he's going to have a different outbound port because it's dynamic. It's going to be opened up just for that communication. It may be using port 80 deep down, but for that particular communication, it's using maybe port 49,956. It's dynamically opened, and then it establishes the communication, and then it communicates on port 80 if it's a website. Okay? The reason that is the case, we have all these dynamic ports, is because Zach's computer may be carrying on a conversation with his computer, and 15 different internet sites. And so even though they may all be accessing a website, which is port 80 traffic, it opens these dynamic ports so that it can keep track of these different connections. So it can keep track of these different connections. So inbound and outbound ports. Inbound are almost always, if I've got a firewall, if I've got a website behind a firewall, my inbound port is almost always going to be port 80. Okay? If I've got a website. If I've got an email server, my inbound port is always going to be port 25, unless I manually change that. Okay, questions about what we've talked about so far? These are some of the ports you're going to need to know. God bless. You need to know ports 21 and 22 are FTP. Actually, we use port 22 for secure FTP also. Okay? So you need to know port 21, you need to know port 25, 23, port 80, port 110, though very few people use POP3 anymore. Port 389, port 443, port 3389. I know that seems like a lot. Make sure that you have this chart in your notes. If you have this chart in your notes, then you'll pass the test. Yes?
Is this on the book?
Yes. This chart should be in the book. If it's not in the book, you can go out and copy and paste from any picture on the internet. You know, most commonly used transport ports. And I'll tell you what protocol and what the default port is. Okay? All right, we're going to stop today's lecture on that because the next topic is layer 5. What questions do you have? Do not forget to fill out the exit ticket today, tonight, whatever. Is the clock still off? No, kind of. It's about 4 minutes slow. Questions, questions, questions. Yes, sir.
What was the inbound port? Like, where did that do again?
What is the what?
Inbound.
Inbound port is always going to follow, almost always going to follow this. If it's using default, the inbound port is going to be these. So if I've got an FTP server, I'm going to communicate on port 21. If I've got a telnet server, or if I want to be able to communicate via telnet, I'm going to use port 23. If I've got a web server, I'm usually going to use port 80. But outbound, your computer will use one of those virtual ports, those dynamically assigned ports. It's still communicating. It's going to ask eventually for port 21, but that's buried down underneath the packet. Okay, it uses a virtual port to maintain that connection, but when it gets down to it, it's going to be asking for port 21 if it's an FTP server. That answer your question?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Anyone having trouble getting their notes synchronized? Anyone have trouble getting the assignments synchronized? Seeing the assignments? How many of you are using solely the web version of OneNote? A couple? How come? It's just as simple? Okay. All right. And that's fine, I don't care. I don't think there are as many tools, but that's fine, it gets the job done, that's all I care about. Okay? What?
I don't like the way the offline version is formatted.
Okay. All right, so now, one reminder, a week from this Thursday will either be the test or the field trip. Field trip most likely. Remote students are welcome, just email me whether or not you're going to come or not. Okay, so if you are going to be there for the field trip, which is here, 8 o'clock, Thursday the 17th, that's Eastern time, then you're welcome to come along. Otherwise, you'll have a test on that day. Everyone else will have a test the following Tuesday. If you're on the field trip, you'll have a test the following Tuesday. Okay? Yes, sir.
The final score you said after 433.
As in which ones we need to use, or which ones you need to memorize. RDP 3389. Any other questions? Make sure you do your exit ticket. Make sure you keep your notes up to date. Your notes should be complete through this part of the chapter at least. And that is all. Would you turn off the video, please?